Life experiences, life lessons. This is My Experiments with Truth by Ikenna Q. Azala. Role models set the precedence for our own behavior, correct? For those the individuals whose actions we often seek to mimic. Naturally, today I wish to discuss what I call the Three Kings Syndrome, that collectively and individually we suffer from. What do I mean by this? Well, if you notice during Christmas, we valorize the three kings, the recognition of the star and the gifts they gave. But unfortunately for us, as sweet as these sentiments are, it actually reflects our lack of clarity and indolence about what constitutes service, as well as a lack of recognition about the needs of the Christ. For we recognize Jesus during Christmas, at least those who consider it a spiritual festival, sing songs about him, give the gifts of words, and then vanish back to our lives after Christmas is over. We do exactly what the three kings did, which is give the most superficial gifts possible, and then we leave the kingdom of our lives unchanged. Correct? We return back to business as usual. For it was a time we perceived that something was special, but then we really didn't do the hardest work, which is subjecting our entire lives to the service of the Christ. And that brings us to what constitutes a gift, because the three wise men, as we call them, right, it's interesting, but a quick aside, what actually makes someone wise? They're known sometimes as the three wise men, but unfortunately, this is because we've read it in books or sang songs about it. But recognition of a star is not what makes an individual wise. So this is one of the habits and tendencies that we have in society of just hearing about things and then just adopting it without considering what it means. So again, there are three kings. And unless we have knowledge to justify what makes them wise, then they are really just three kings. But back to the mainstream, though. So what is a gift? Right? A gift is something that recompenses value that is experienced by another. So it is something that is given that can serve and further another's interests. When you've provided value for me, when I've experienced something useful through your existence and through your activity, then I give a gift, which symbolizes, you can say, it's like an extension of energy that wishes to reinforce a certain behavior in you, or a certain interest, or goal, or aspiration. No matter what words we use, it's typically the same thing, a way of providing balance. So then we can ask ourselves the question, in terms of the gifts of the three kings, what value was their earthly existence? And we can actually say, without being too harsh, that the way the mission of Jesus ended would have been unchanged if the three kings were not born. This is not being harsh, this is just an assessment, because if the value they're providing was earthly frankincense and myrrh, then after that, they vanished back to their kingdoms without doing anything more. Then their gifts were really valueless. If we say, oh, no, because it drew people's attention to the baby Jesus, no, the shepherds received tidings from the angels. So, and then they announced it. So, those tidings and the news of the birth, people already had. Do you see where I'm going with this? So the question becomes, what gift would have been useful to this baby Jesus? If you consider the time, you had King Herod. You had the tyrants of the religious institutions at that time, in the synagogues. Then you have the Roman Empire. You have different forces. So you had the religious force, you had the earthly military, that force. So Jesus was up against formidable, power bases. So the question would have been, what would have been valuable? I'm just going to give hypotheticals, just examples of what things that could have been valuable. The offering of their militaries to physically guard and ensure the safety of Jesus throughout his entire earth life is an example. If anyone knew that if you try to crucify this Jesus, if you try to murder him, our three kingdoms will rise up and ensure that we defend him tooth and nail, then people would step back. But as it was, there was nothing physically to defend him. Another thing would have been, you had three kingdoms, three different peoples who were thirsting for the word of truth. Imagine a scenario where, as Jesus reached maturity, or rather he grew into his mission, they opened their kingdoms to him. Say, come to my kingdom and spread this truth. Every word you say will become law, so that we can transform this into an image of your teachings. And our scribes, when you speak and give tidings about the Almighty Father, will document it, so that three kingdoms will have scribes that documents it, so that you'd have a variety of sources of the teachings of Jesus, instead of it not being dominated by one group of people. You have different sources. And three kings would serve him throughout their entire lives. This is an example of a gift that might have been useful, but as it was, that wasn't what happened. I only painted that picture as an example of what type of gift might have been useful. And for us, that's how it still is today. Right? Our lives are like kingdoms. So like the three kings, only what can be of value is if we offer our lives to be transformed by the teachings of Jesus. If we're willing to subject everything to transform into an image of his teachings. If we're willing to offer the temple of the Spirit, you see, and open it to his words of truth, at least to the efforts of digging into it to be transformed through it. This is the harder gift to give, because it actually requires effort consistently, not just words that we dump and then move on. So I'm bringing up the three kings in the example, not to criticize them, but to say that that is what we do today. Because singing about Jesus and doing Christmas plays and then returning back to our lives unchanged is the exact same thing that the kings did. It's repeating it. For we've seen them as role models, so that's who we mimic. And over the years, the only gift that I've realized that can be given is the gift of compliance, the gift of obedience. For if I'm really thankful for something, then I seek to make use of it. I seek to further its interests, and I seek to comply. And that is only when we can say we are thankful for something, when we reinforce its value. The three kings syndrome is widespread because of the superficiality of minimum effort required. That's what's at the heart of it. But how we celebrate Christmas, the true value of it, can be found after Christmas, when the decorations go down, when all the festivities end. What do we do then? Where do we devote time and energy? That's really when it starts. And I believe that with the coming new year, with every single year, that's when we have the opportunity to begin anew, or rather to rededicate ourselves to the cause of inner transformation, to use His words to transform our lives, for the heart to prepare Him room. And then we offer the kingdom of our lives to be used at His disposal. Then we are actually celebrating the birth. Because celebrating the birth is linked with the life. Because the birth is just the entry point, but the life is the actual activity. And that is how I see it in moving forward. So it is my wish for myself and for others that we are able to make use of this upward thrusting power of jubilation to actually make permanent changes, to begin the process at least earnestly. And it is my sincerest wish that we experience peace and joy and happiness. And it's my wish that everyone has a wonderful new year and begins the process of inner transformation or continues it. And when we do this, we would then really be offering the best gift possible, which is the gift of our life and a gift of the spirits, the gift of our consistent effort, which amounts to really the gift of faithfulness and obedience. And on that, I wish you a wonderful new year ahead, to you and yours. Until next time.